I'm Kassian from NetApp Instaclustr. Welcome to the video version of OpenSearch 101. If you'd like a similar written version, there's a link in the description. Today, I'll be covering everything you need to get started with OpenSearch on NetApp Instaclustr. In this video, I'll cover the prerequisites and installs needed for this project, how to set up your own OpenSearch cluster on NetApp Instaclustr, using Node.js to connect to your cluster, and indexing and searching data in your cluster. First, I'll cover everything you need to follow along with the code. The first thing you need is a decent understanding of what OpenSearch is and how it works. If you're completely new to the topic, there's links to videos and docs about OpenSearch basics in the description. Next, I'd highly suggest you follow along with the sample code on GitHub or in your text editor, so there's a link to a gist in the description. A working knowledge of JavaScript will also be helpful if you wish to follow along with the code. For installs, there is only one. Because NetApp Instaclustr will be managing your OpenSearch cluster, you only need to install Node.js and NPM, which will be used to communicate with the cluster. There is a link to the download page in the description. Once you've installed and caught up on everything, you'll be ready to set up an OpenSearch cluster on NetApp Instaclustr. You can set up any size OpenSearch cluster for this demo. I'd recommend the free trial options, which are highlighted where applicable. If you'd like a more detailed walkthrough of the configuration options, there are links in the description. Once you have set up your options and clicked Create Cluster, you'll be taken to the cluster detail page, where hopefully you'll see a provisioning status in the main panel. Now's a great time to take a short break, as provisioning takes about 10 minutes. Go stretch or get some water, and then you'll have a fully functional OpenSearch cluster in the cloud. Once your cluster says Provisioning Status Running on the cluster detail page, you're ready to write code to connect to your cluster. But first, you'll need some information about your cluster and permission to connect to it from your local machine. Click the connection info link on the left sidebar. To complete the code segment, you'll need a URL to sign into and a username password to sign in with. You can get all three from this pane. Copy them into a place where you can get to them for later. Please note that in production, you would use a different authentication strategy, as shown by the warning. Next, click the Firewall Rules tab and make sure that your local IP is in the list of allowed IP addresses for your cluster. Now you can write the Node.js code you need to connect to your cluster. I'll be using Visual Studio Code to write and run commands, but you can use whatever you like. First, create a folder for your project. I called mine OpenSearch 101 Demo. Then, in that folder, run npm init-y. This creates a package.json file for you and helps you manage dependencies. Now you'll use npm to install the OpenSearch client for Node.js and a library called .env that allows you to share sensitive values like passwords with code, but not commit those values to source control. Now you'll create an index.js, .env, and .gitignore file in your project folder. The index.js file will contain your Node.js code. The .env file will hold our credentials away from the code. And gitignore is in case you decide to add this project to source control. It tells Git which files and folders to ignore. Now we need to set up our credentials. Open the .env file and add the credentials to it in the format provided by the example code. Open up the .gitignore file next and add lines for the .env file and the node modules folder. This is so you don't accidentally add your credentials or the node modules folder to source control. You're now ready to start coding. Open up the index.js file in your code editor. The first things you want to do are load the modules you installed. First, .env, which includes the config command, which loads in the environment variables outlined in the .env file. Then, you want to create some variables to hold OpenSearch cluster information, such as host, protocol, and port. The auth token comes next. The process.env variables point to the .env loaded values. You're now ready to create an OpenSearch client that will interface with your OpenSearch cluster. Use require to load in just the client object from the OpenSearch library. Then, create a client object using a constructor. You'll pass in variables you created in the previous step here to create a URL that OpenSearch can use to connect. Next, you'll write some utility functions that allow you to print the results of your requests to the terminal. Now for the start function, which will run once you are connected to your OpenSearch cluster. In it, you'll check cluster health, create an index, add some documents, and search them. Inside the start function, you'll add a request for cluster health and print the response. To check if your code and credentials work, you can now run your code using Node. You should get back a status response similar to the one on the screen. Now you'll add a function that checks for an existing DevRel team index and deletes it if it exists. This will prevent errors when the script is run repeatedly. Now that you've cleaned up, you'll create your new index, providing in a name, devrel_team, and a mapping for the document data. You can now check your code again by running the script. you should see the cluster health response, an optional index deletion response, and the index creation response. Now that you have code that can connect and operate your OpenSearch cluster, let's take a look at indexing data. First, you'll create a function to index some data into your DevRel team index. First, create the data to be inserted, names and titles, in arrays. Then create a function that loops over those data arrays to create documents. You'll use random number generation for the number of months on the team. Finally, write the code to print the response for each document indexing and run the function. And now for the last step, searching data in your OpenSearch cluster. You're going to write a function to search your cluster that takes in a query. Then you'll create a timeout function to allow the OpenSearch cluster to index and make the data searchable before running the search. In this timeout, call your new search function twice, once with a blank query and once with titles containing manager. Finally, at the end of the timeout function, we delete the DevRel team index as cleanup. You can now run the code to see the search results at the end. You should see 5 results for the first query and 1 result for the second. I hope you enjoyed watching this video and learning along with us. If you'd like to see more, like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.